The law of interconnectedness states that everything is intertwined and therefore works together to do the purposes of the universe. This law gets broken when something tries to dominate, which in turn upsets the greater balance and thus the operations and cooperation of all different levels of life everywhere. It requires a reaction from nature in order to bring things back into balance. So, when we place the breaking of this law within the context of humanity, because it is clear humanity does not recognize universal interconnectedness, we become witness to a disaster. The breaking of this law occurs when the ego is grasped too tightly, and thus one's perception of self is driven to rise above all others. In other words, whole selfishness. What's worse, at epidemic proportions across a spectrum of large groups of people, and we've certainly reached that across this planet, this type of selfishness becomes the collective ego of a nation. But it is so important to point out, the ego is nothing more than a bogus lot of perception people adhere to that does not tangibly, fundamentally exist. Yet when those personal beliefs, these non-physical ideas of self, begin to take over to the point of breaking the rules of interconnectedness, at that point, such ego thinking has become an aberration, a true form of mental illness. Spiritual texts talk about self-abnegation. You know, the letting go of the self when you are in service. Part of that is to understand you are wrapped up with the whole. You are integrated with it, and that at a larger scale, you are it. But yet so is everything else. One cannot be divided from itself. Think of it like the body, because the body is an interconnected series of systems, just like the universe. When all things are in balance, when the interconnectedness of the body is honored, it's healthy. Your experiences are positive. But when something in the body goes out of balance, when the interconnectedness is interrupted, you usually have cancer. We also get that with our experiences. We are here for the expression of the soul, and thus the universe, through the distribution of our spirits, coming into flesh and going out of flesh. We give rise to it all. But when a particular type of ego dominates, when selfishness attempts to overrule, it disrupts the unity of life's expression. It disrupts the freedom of that expression, because whoever is dominating is trying to mold the greater aspects of reality to their will, to their dominance. Now, of course, this happens in all kingdoms. That is, when a particular portion of life becomes too dominant in the environment, something will crop up to prune it. It happens in the world of plants, insects, wildlife, everywhere. If something becomes too dominant, the greater expression, the biodiversity, will step up to bring things back into balance. If allowed to happen naturally and we don't interfere. There we go, messing with the law again. No one is an island unto themselves. In fact, It is when you try to make yourself your own island, or to force everyone to conform to your governance of the island, when really everyone is in charge, you break the law, at which point the constable, which is the law of balance, will step in. How does this look if the lawbreaker appears to be the greater portion of an entire species? How did we come to this? Simple. The unintended after effect of language. Since everything is one, it is only when, through the auspices of language, does separation begin. When we assign words to designate things for purposes of discussion, it immediately creates a psychological separation within the mind of self from the object being discussed. But that is an arbitrary separation. It isn't real. Again, I'll use the body as an example. The body has absolutely no separation, yet you psychologically separate your hands from your feet, your liver from your spleen, your brain from your stomach. Yet, they all go together. This separation begins and ends strictly at the creation of the words used to provide a point of discussion, when somebody gave what they were looking at a name. The language separated the structures. This is what we have done with the world. The plants, animals, everything. They are not separate from you, just as your hands are not separate from your feet. We have only designated it as such through our language. Now you may say, I am not my house. I am separate from my house. Yet how many times have you gone into someone's home and by virtue of their decoration, their style, you see that their house is an outgrowth, a reflection of that person living in it. In other words, though the house may not be attached to their body like an appendage, it is attached to their spirit, which is eternal and exists beyond time, space, and the separation of things. All things are one. You are the universe. The universe is you. What we have allowed this psychological impact of language to produce is that arbitrary, unreal, false lie of an other to the point of genocide. The genocide of people, the genocide of the planet. We are only harming ourselves. There is no other. There are those laws of interconnectedness and balance, precisely because there is no separation. One cannot divide itself from itself. There is only the illusion of such. And when we lose sight of that, we are literally blind from what life has to offer and risk destroying our collective and personal universe.